Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, Content Specialist for the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which is part of the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Welcome to our Middle School Civics Highlight Series. Today we look at Benchmark 2.6, examining the election and voting process at the local, state, and national levels. In Part 1, we focus on elections, voting, and political parties. We will explain how elections and voting impact citizens at the local, state, and national levels. And we will also explain the origins of the Republican and Democratic political parties and evaluate their roles in shaping public policy. We will ask, are political parties effective in shaping public policy as well? First, we will look at the impact of elections on the national levels of government. There are 542 elected federal offices: the President, Vice President, 100 U.S. Senators, 2 from each state, 435 U.S. Representatives, 4 delegates to the House of Representatives from U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia. There is also 1 resident commissioner from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Note that each of these offices is responsible for each one of us in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, the President and Vice President are responsible for the entire country. 2 senators per state. And then, of course, 1 U.S. representative per district or U.S. territory or the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So that means that even though there are 542 federal offices, you and I only have the chance to select technically 5 of them: 1 representative, 2 senators, the president and vice president. And the reason why I said technically is because the president and vice president are elected together, which means that we can't vote for president from one party or vice president from another. So I want to make sure that we really only can vote 4 times for the 5 people who represent us. Now we're going to look at the impact of elections on the local and state levels of government. In most states, state officials include governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and attorney general, state Supreme Court justices, controller, treasurer, state senators, and state legislators. These officials are elected by the voters of the districts that they serve. Now, the governor's district is the entire state. The lieutenant governor, who is elected with the governor in Florida, but not in every state, also is responsible for the entire state. In the state of Florida, the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor, but at the same time, there are some offices where, even though the position is appointed, it's elected officials who appoint that person. So there is a line of accountability if people are unhappy with appointments. In the state of Florida, Supreme Court justices are first appointed, and then they must secure retention. Retention means that those state Supreme Court justices serve on the Supreme Court at the will of the voters, in that once they're in the position, every 7 years, they need to ask the voters if they can stay in their position, and that's called retention. Many states hold referenda to submit legislative matters to the voters for approval or rejection. Other matters that may appear on state ballots include bond initiatives, amendments to the state constitution, and recalls of state elected officials. So understand then that the people both elect policymakers, and that's what's most commonly done, or the people themselves may be policymakers, and that's when they vote on referenda. Local officials make up the vast majority of elected officials in the U.S. These officials include mayors, town or city council members, county commissioners, etc. The number and titles of elected officials vary at the local level because cities, towns, and villages and counties are so different. And so within different states, there there may be different rules or requirements as to the way that elections are held, whether or not there are term limits, what those term limits would be, how long the term of office takes place, when the election takes place, etc. So it is important then, through all of this, that if you and I are going to have an impact on elections, we must become informed about the elections. We must become informed about who's running, what are their responsibilities, and if there is a policy question on the ballot, what is the policy question? What are the consequences for the state or county or city if this referendum passes or doesn't? Now we're going to look at the impact of voting on the local, state, and national levels of government. What we have in front of us is a graphic, a line graph specifically, focusing on voter turnout between 1990 and 2018. And what this shows us is that across all demographic groups that are presented in the graphic, that voter turnout was lower in 1990 compared with 2018. So what does this mean in the context of the impact of voting on the local, state, and national levels of government? What it means is that the more that you and I participate in the electoral process, if we vote in every election that we are eligible to vote for example, what that means is that public officials will then know that we are watching them once they're elected. If we are engaged and committed enough to participate in an election, then we should stay engaged once those individuals who are elected are holding office and using their power. And so our impact is not only to select public officials, but also to pay attention to what those public officials are doing. The higher the turnout, the more the public is in essence using its voice. And so that's the impact of voting at the local, state, and national levels of government. Now we're going to look at the origins of the two major political parties in the United States. The Republican Party was established in 1854. The purpose of the party was to address the expansion of slavery into U.S. territories after passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The core beliefs of the Republican Party are that the national government should take a less active role in people's lives and that people can take care of themselves without government help. They sometimes support lowering taxes and also lowering government spending. The Democratic Party was established in 1828. The origins of that party emerged to advocate for more states' rights and less central government than was pursued by the Federalists. So here we see an interesting contrast, that the Democratic Party's current core beliefs focus on the national government taking a more active role in people's lives, especially those in need. Democrats sometimes support raising taxes and government spending to pay for social programs. So what we see from this small amount of information on the screen is that parties change their positions. Parties change with social change. That the Democratic Party's origins focused on anti-federalism, focused on state-centered government. And now the current core beliefs of the Democratic Party focus more on a national government presence being more dominant in people's lives compared with the Republican Party, which now supports a more decentralized government system. Now we're going to talk about the effectiveness of political parties in shaping public policy. Now some of you may be wondering, why am I looking at this cartoonish image of an elephant and a donkey, and we're going to be talking about the effectiveness of political parties in shaping public policy? The reason is that the elephant emerged in the 1800s as the symbol of the Republican Party. The donkey emerged in the 1800s as the symbol of the Democratic Party. But the effectiveness is demonstrated by the fact that each of them represents a unique animal unrelated to the other animal. Therefore, how is a party effective in shaping public policy? When its members stay together and keep the shape, keep the vision, keep the platform of their political party. And so not only are the Republican and Democratic parties very different from one another, but their effectiveness is going to be based on their ability to work together and to stick together on the issues that are of most importance to the party. Thank you for joining me for Middle School Civics Highlights. Do you still have questions? Please contact us using the information that appears on the screen. Till next time, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine. Thank you for joining me.